Good morning, everybody. We are going to get things underway this morning. So if you can take your seats, grab a coffee or whatever before we really get into this. I just want to thank everybody for turning up, and we hope that you'll have a very enjoyable day learning about permitting processes. I would like to extend thank yous to our four main sponsors, and that is BEF, Bonneville Environmental Foundation, in particular Robert Warren, WDFW, US Forest Service, and Four Peaks. We very much appreciate their assistance with this workshop. I'd also like to extend my thanks to the UCSRB staff. They've done a great job of getting this organised. So without any further ado, Ryan, if you can come in and get us underway. Thank you.
All right. Hello, everybody. It's a little lower for me here. Just a few things to kick us off. Just first of all, thank you all for helping us develop this workshop. We really worked with both permitters and permittees to develop this workshop and make it beneficial for everybody. Really a lot of useful information. But with that said, we'll probably have topics we don't cover or questions that you still all will have. But the good news is we have a way for you all to give feedback. We developed a feedback form for you all to give feedback, both a paper version and a digital version. It's the same thing, it's just different versions. The paper version is the pastel colored papers that are on your table. And then the QR code gives you access to the digital version. The QR code's both on the paper version in the upper right. There's that quarter-page paper, and then there's also on your agenda the QR code as well. So we prefer the digital version. It means less typing for us, but obviously if you prefer the paper version, that's fine too. And that feedback will help us identify if there's certain topics that weren't covered or questions that weren't answered, that if there's like a theme that kind of rises to the top that a lot of people had, we'd like to have a follow-up webinar or something like that to kind of address those issues. Also, a side note, apologies for the construction. We totally didn't know that was going to happen, but permitting applications is about being flexible, right? So we're gonna get some practice with that today. Also want to underline, I'm sure you all will be, but let's just remain cordial. Permitting process can be frustrating, both from the permitter and the permittee perspective, but having talked with you all, everyone's hearts are in the good place. You all want to improve streams and help recover salmon. So let's just be constructive with our feedback and our conversations today. A note about today's agenda, just kind of lay out kind of how things are going, and you can see in your agenda that you have. Broadly, we'll have case study 1 in the morning, case study 2 in the afternoon. We'll have kind of some miscellaneous topics and a larger panel discussion in the last chunk of time. And just how that's going to flow is just laid out for both of the case studies. The first case study, the person sharing will share for about 10 minutes about that case study. Then we'll go into a permitting strategy discussion, which will be kicked off by that person, kind of share how they went about the permitting process and have a discussion about that. And then next will be the meat of that case study, having the permitters kind of share a bit about their permitting process, but also how to address that specific case study. And then we'll have a 30-minute panel discussion. We'll invite all the permitters here, and then those are online to kind of be up front. We can ask some questions about, given that kind of case study context, any questions that still remain. And then, so those are both case studies in the last 2 hours. Forest Service will provide some permitting process updates. A few of the agencies want to share some kind of permit streamlining and some process improvement they're working on. In the last hour and 10 minutes will be just a broad panel discussion for you all to ask questions. So that's the rough layout of today. I want to mention too, just to kind of liven things up a little bit, the red bags are not gift bags. Someone asked that, like, no, that'd been cool, maybe next time. But it was red because you're cutting through the red tape of permitting, and I literally typed in like salmon stream restoration permit into ChatGPT, like a joke, like I asked a joke. So it's like ChatGPT jokes generated about permitting. So enjoy those, liven things up a bit. With that, as Aaron Rosenblum comes up to share the first case study, a few logistical things. Bathrooms are straight back and a hard right. They're kind of back in that corner. There's also drinking fountains back there. Obviously, as you know, we have coffee, tea in the back, and we'll have refreshments during the breaks, which first breaks at 9:50. Lunch will be on your own. And FYI, some of the restaurants in Wenatchee are closed on Tuesdays, so on the agenda we listed restaurants that are open on Tuesdays, so just an FYI on that. And then finally for permitters, your presentation, you can see it here, so you don't have to like look back. There's a clicker up here with, I think there's a laser pointer. Yep, so you got a laser pointer. And then Megan's gonna be the timekeeper. She's got 5 minutes. You can see her there, 2 minutes, and then stop. At which point I'll come up and kind of usher you off to the for the next person. So with that, I'll let Aaron kick off our first case study about Lower Peshastin.
Alrighty, good morning everyone. Aaron Rosenblum, I am with Cascade Fisheries. This morning we're going to talk about Lower Peshastin Creek. I've been working on this project for 5.5 years. The project itself has actually been in the works longer than that, so likely some of you out there know about this one, but we're just going to spend the first 10 minutes or so kind of going over what the project is, what we're doing out there, and lay the groundwork for all the permitting discussions to come. We do have all of the permits in place for this project. Phase 1 was completed this past summer, and then Phase 2 of the project is going to be completed next summer. So, as the title might suggest, we're working on Peshastin Creek, the lower third of a mile of Peshastin Creek. Peshastin Creek comes into the Wenatchee River right around river miles 17 and a half. It's really kind of the major tributary to the Wenatchee River downstream of Leavenworth. It has a long history of impacts from resource extraction to highway building to agriculture to human development, all impacting Peshastin Creek. Despite that, it does have our 3 ESA species. In fact, it's somewhat of a stronghold for Upper Columbia steelhead. And the property owner is Department of Fish and Wildlife for the project. They manage the site as a water access site. So, historic conditions, 2 photos here. The first one on the left is 1955. The one on the right is 1972. The one on the right is kind of rotated 45 degrees, but in both cases, Peshastin Creek's flowing from left to right. The Wenatchee River's there on the right. You can see in both instances this nice braided channel form there at the confluence. In the 55 photo, it appears that the creek's totally dry, likely from agricultural withdrawals. A different problem. There is some water there. This is in 72, that is low flow. You can see all the water is contained in that lower channel, and then the upper channel appears to be, this kind of secondary high flow channel. Fast forward to today, in 1975, let's see if I can do the laser. Yeah, this access road was built, effectively cutting off that primary channel. And in fact, when that road was built, they also ran a D10 bulldozer straight down Peshastin Creek. So they lowered it, straightened it, made it nice and hydraulically efficient. But as we know, that's not really great for habitat, watershed processes, or fish. So here's what it looks like today. The one on the left is that existing channel. It used to be the secondary channel, now it's the only channel. It's plain bed, cobble, boulder dominated. There's not really rearing habitat, no spawning habitat. No floodplain. Peshastin Creek does not get out of this trench that it's in, even at a 100-year flood. Very minimal riparian, just a nice small band, because that's the only elevation that it can persist at. And then the photos on the right are the former primary channel, which has since been dry for 50 years. The other big component of existing conditions pre-project is there's a bunch of lead contamination on site. The Dryden Gun Club here used to shoot trap out over the river because, of course, they did. So that's all those colored boxes and circles and stuff are lead contamination, either actual lead shot, or soil that has like fine lead particles in it. So, what are we doing out there? Step 1 is we got to remove the lead. So that's what you're seeing in this picture here, the purple boxes. and hatches are where where there is known contamination, where the soil gets dug up, processed, lead shot gets removed. If there's still lead contamination, that soil gets treated, so the lead's stabilized. Once everything is processed and treated, the lead's removed, all of that excess soil gets put on site on the kind of the orangey gold box is where that stuff goes. So once the lead is out of there, we can actually go and do our restoration project. The road had to remain in place. The road is here. So we couldn't fully restore access to that historic channel, but we did kind of want to emulate the alignment. So to do that, we're kind of excavating this new channel in a similar alignment that connects to the historic channel right about here. And then that historic channel is restored in that section. So the red polygon there, what you see, that is all excavation. So in addition to, creating that primary channel again, there's a whole bunch of floodplain that's going to be excavated. The green polygon is where we're going to take some of that excavated material, create a stream bed mix, and then put that mix into the current existing channel because we want to make that a secondary channel again. So to do that, we got to raise the grade up a little bit so water doesn't preferentially just shoot right down that straightaway. All the excess material gets spoiled on site. That's the yellow polygon there. And then raising the road up a little bit, that's the purple there, so it doesn't get flooded. Yeah, and this is just the project without all those colored polygons. You can see a whole bunch of wood going in. Pools being excavated underneath those log jams, and then of course, really extensive riparian floodplain revegetation once the earthwork's all done. So that is the project. One slide on project benefits, mainly because one particular permit, the Clean Water Act permits, it kind of matters. What I'm about to say, it makes a difference between if you go down one permit pathway or another. Hydraulic models here, existing conditions on the top, proposed conditions on the bottom. Once we do the project, the 1.3 acres of existing aquatic habitat will all be restored. We're creating 3.7 acres of new aquatic habitat, and then of that 3.7 acres, 2.3 acres will be floodplain. This floodplain will be inundated for multiple weeks, on average during the growing season. This hydrology will be, sufficient to, over time, potentially passively lead to the creation of riverine wetlands. Speaking of wetlands, moving on to kind of the permitting considerations portion. We do have an existing wetland out there. It is right in the middle of the historic channel and also where our new primary channel is going to be. We call that the historic channel wetland. It is 0.6 acres. That area does get backwatered by the Wenatchee River at the 100-year flow. And it's got a forested quartering class. So because of that, it's a Category 2 wetland based on special characteristics. If you just did functions and values, it would be a Category 3 wetland. It's a depressional wetland, and it's got a habitat score of 5. Other permitting considerations, we are in the FEMA floodway. So this is the pre-project existing conditions flood hazard map. And some other permitting considerations. So the landowner is Department of Fish and Wildlife, like I mentioned. The funding, 100% of the lead cleanup is funded by the Department of Ecology. And then separately, the habitat restoration portion is funded by BPA, the Colville, and Surfboard. Okay, questions just on, that was kind of like the real quick and dirty background on the project. Questions on what we're doing out there, or kind of any important things that you would want to know for permitting that I didn't mention. The lead itself actually gets hauled off-site and recycled, so all the lead gets removed and taken off-site. All of the material that is since been, let's see, let's get here. All the material that's had the lead removed, and then if it's either tested to be clean or treated so that it stabilizes whatever fine particles of lead are still there, and then that is tested to make sure it's stabilized. All that gets spoiled in this kind of orange polygon here. And then a cap of clean soil goes on top of that. Mm-hmm. Another one? Yeah.
Survey work that went in this area? Thanks, Amanda.
Oh, that's a great question, McLean. I totally
I
forgot.
think he heard me.
Repeat that question for the online people.
The question was, talk a little bit about if there were any cultural considerations. So there's some interesting stuff that comes up with that, especially with kind of lead agencies and process. So I don't know if maybe that would be better for that session, but I will mention, which I totally forgot to include, there is a cultural resource right around, well, let's see, no, it's over here somewhere. It's like over here. Let's see. Yeah, it's over here somewhere. It's basically just a bunch of old cans. But it is a cultural resource, and we did have some talk about it. I actually talked to one of the old timers who lives around here. He's like, oh yeah, I think those are my cans from 50 years ago. Anyway, another question? Okay. The lead work is completed, yep. That happened this past summer. And then we're doing the restoration next summer. As far as like strategy?
Yeah.
Yeah, oh yeah. So yeah, I guess moving on to like the second item there on the agenda, strategy. For me, I guess, oh, going the wrong way. I think where it starts is kind of these slides right here. Step one is what are your resources out there? What are the impacts? What are the quality of those resources? What are the different nexuses? Are you in a zone or are you not in a zone? And who are the players? Do you have multiple federal agencies? All this stuff is kind of going to start to dictate who's involved and timelines. And then once I kind of have all this, I start trying to actually map out, okay, what permit do I need first? Does this permit need this permit to be finished before we can get this permit? And so they're all kind of pretty intertwined. So I kind of try to start mapping out what it's going to look like, and that kind of can set expectations for timelines and just your overall, what the overall process is going to look like. Yeah. Oh, thank you.
Sure, yeah. Aaron's gonna be our guinea pig and hang out. So this next, 15 minutes or so is just kind of an open discussion about permitting strategy. I know talking to both permitters and permittees, kind of how, what permits you apply to first, timing and that sort of thing is really key, and that can kind of make or break your permitting process. So we heard from you all to kind of encourage us to have a time of discussion right now to share strategy. So definitely not time to nitpick like Aaron's approach, but maybe thoughts of any kind of any other thoughts on permitting strategy, how to approach things, and permitters or permittees. This is kind of meant to be open, kind of brainstorm for the benefit of all.
Aaron, I've worked with Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife most exclusively with the HPA process, but I was curious, as WDFW, as the landowner, do you engage with the same folks that you would for an HPA, or is that a separate portion of WDFW, or how do you engage with them as the landowner?
Yeah, that's a good question. You still need an HPA, of course, and those folks are the same, but doing a project on WDFW land, they have their own separate internal process, basically, and I didn't really include much of that in this presentation. It's because it's pretty specialized just to doing work on WDFW, but it's called the restoration pathways, and yeah, there's a whole separate process and pretty significant level of efforts, at least for a project of this, size and complexity that goes into that. And those, you're working with, it's kind of like a group of the regional staff, the different bios that they have on staff, and there's just a bunch of different kind of things you work through with them. Yeah, good question.
Hey, thanks, Aaron. So yeah, we do have a process if you want to do restoration projects on WDFW land. It's called our restoration pathway, and it's really to ensure that each one of our programs, fish, wildlife, habitat enforcement, and our real estate department, all has a say on what sort of major construction projects happen on our land. And how that works is we ask to be part of each design phase, so the scoping, the 30, the 60, the 90. We kind of approve each step and have a chance to comment on those. And then you also need a temporary use permit, which is a permit to really do any sort of work on our land, and it's really to make sure that insurance is in place in case there is an incident. And then additionally, you also have to ensure that cultural resource compliance is being met. Yeah.
Thank you, Mallory.
Hi, Aaron. Can you talk a little bit about your funding approach and, when you start to look at funding avenues? Is it, before permitting? Is it during permitting? Kind of that timeline?
Yeah, great question. Kind of all the above, I suppose. For this project, we were going after construction funds for the restoration portion before permitting and during permitting, and then as things kind of went along, it became apparent that we needed some more funding, so we went and asked for more. So it can be both, for sure. Yeah, from my perspective, it's good. It feels good to have stuff in place early, but a lot of times things change, projects can get delayed, and then inevitably, it ends up costing more. And then for the lead cleanup, Department of Ecology has been great. They've said for 10 years that the money's going to be there when you guys are ready to do it. It just took a while to get there, and then when it finally came time, Ecology came through, and they had the money.
We have a question from online. This is from Allison Lutz. She said, "Hi, Aaron. At what design phase did you engage with FEMA MT2 team for the CLOMR process? With the Nason Collar project, we needed to close 2 final designs and final ESA compliance approval prior to initiating FEMA CLOMR submittals."
Yeah, I think this is something maybe, we'll talk about at some point today, but for the CLOMR, you do have to have your ESA totally completed, and that's kind of what I was hitting at earlier is, well, for that, you need to have a different permit in place, the permit that's going to provide that ESA coverage. And then, of course, when you're going to do your CLOMR, you don't want to be at a spot in your designs where you're going to make a change later, because then that changes your whole analysis of, what the rise would be or isn't. So for this project, we submitted it was a 90% design. So basically like a draft final design is when we submitted to FEMA.
I have a question about what pathway you took with the Corps to permit the project.
We ended up going nationwide. I don't want to reveal too much. I think there'll be some good discussions later, but it did end up being a nationwide project, but I think it was probably pretty close to going the other way. Because, you know, yeah, that historic channel is sitting right there, or the historic wetland is right there in the channel that's, you know, used to be river and will be river again shortly. So I think that's a really interesting discussion.
Okay, yeah.
I say table it for that, yeah.
Sounds good, thank you.
Aaron, I'm assuming this section of Peshastin is not DNR waters of the state then?
Correct.
State aquatic land, sorry.
That's one of the only permits that like might be, you know, fairly normal for restoration practitioners that we did not need for this project. Wenatchee River is, Peshastin Creek is not, and we're not working in the Wenatchee River at all.
Aaron, I just have a follow-up from Allison.
Mhm.
How long was your CLOMR process?
Oh, good question. It was a little shy of a year. It was probably about 10 months. Yeah.
Aaron, I want to follow up on that follow-up. You said that you had to have some permitting in place before you went for the CLOMR. Was that your JARPA and your core permit? Is that what you had secured already?
For this particular project, because we have BPA funding, and because we have been working with BPA all along, they felt comfortable saying like, yes, this project is going to meet our HIP, so we will go ahead and issue our ESA, you know, compliance through HIP early. Now, I have a different project that I'm currently in the works on that does not have any BPA funding, and in that case, yeah, you have to go and get your Army Corps permit first, because that's where you get your ESA coverage. So that, you know, those are two long timelines for permitting that cannot really overlap that much, you know. So that's, yeah, that's a challenge for sure.
Hi, I just have a question about your expectations going into the project. I think you mentioned you'd been working on this for 5.5 years. Was there any particular part of the process that kind of surprised you in how long it took, or did you sort of think that was, anticipate that timeline when you started?
The project itself, I think part of the length was disassociated with a lot of different kind of design ideas and a lot of different basically cooks at the table thinking like, you know, trying to figure out what the best option was. There was also a couple of different kind of false starts. Let me jump back here. So there's also power lines that run through the project area. We were looking at moving those. At one point we had a land swap in place with the gun club to move the road, and then we could fully restore the historic channel. But after developing that for a while, that fell through. So we had to kind of go back and say, okay, we can't do that anymore. What else can we do? So there's a lot of kind of like that sort of thing going on where it just took a little while to get to the point where we, okay, this is the path that we're going forward, and, you know, successively starting to advance the project down to, you know, later design phases. Permitting wise, you know, all told, it probably took a little over a year, probably 12 to 14 months, you know, all told. And I think that wasn't totally unexpected, you know, with the CLOMR alone. We were kind of thinking like that might be the case. But there were some things that came up sequence-wise that I guess we weren't totally expecting and not ready for. And my lesson learned from that is I actually go through and kind of map everything out now and say like, okay, this leads to this, I need this before this. So that kind of helps me, you know, figure out what the process is, where the, you know, the hiccups might be, where the delays might be, and that helps me visualize what the overall process might be. Yeah. We got 5 more minutes. Who else got questions?
Alexa Whipple from online, she's just asking if the framework map can be shared.
The framework map.
The permitting framework.
I can share my mental map.
That's
that
oh,
what she's
did you
asking for?
mention a permitting framework when you were talking, or
I might have.
was it all in your head?
It was for this project, but I wrote it down last week. Yeah, I was gonna do this at the end, kind of for the big reveal, but yeah, this is what it looks like for this project. You know, and honestly, looking at it now, it's really not that helpful because it's like, what does this all mean, you know? But actually, like going through it, going through the process, it is super helpful just thinking about like kind of what you need in place when, and what the, you know, the flow, the critical pathway is. So that'd be my, you know, tip to project managers. I didn't really include this in here for project managers though. It's more to say to everyone in this room, you know, I think we can do better than this. And you know, our species are in trouble. Like, we need to figure out a way to make this more efficient. That's my soapbox.
What permit did you start with first, Aaron, or did you start simultaneously a few permits at a time?
Let's see. So, yeah, it was kind of pretty simultaneous. You know, I mean, this box up here, pre-application meetings, you're probably going to hear the regulators say early and often today. You know, we engage usually around like a 30% design, and then, you know, we're continually having these discussions with folks. So they know about the project. We kind of have expectations of what we think are going to happen once we actually submit our permits. So I think pretty much everything happened. I'm trying to think back. I think everything happened pretty much at the same time as far as submitting the JARPA to Army Corps Ecology and WDFW, and then our CLOMR, we might have submitted that a little bit earlier, just knowing the timeline, but I think it was all pretty close to the same time. And then, you know, we already had our HIP and ESA coverage to submit with that.
Aaron, for cultural resources, sorry, here. I'm assuming you guys contracted this out. Does that, and I know this is a potentially high use area historically, did you have to do that really early in the process to even like think about it in conceptuals even, or when did that happen for this one?
No, it was actually later in the process. It probably should have been earlier, honestly, because one of the kind of the delays that we ended up having was with cultural resources. But it was probably around 60% design once we actually got the surveys done. Cultural resources was confusing because BPA was not funding any portion of the lead cleanup. They would not be the lead agency for it. So we essentially did Section 106 and EO 2102 with 2 different lead agencies. From our perspective, the same project, but from the consultation perspective, it was 2 separate projects. So that just kind of, yeah, led to some confusion. It took a while for everyone to figure out that, you know, we had a few meetings between us and BPA and WDFW just trying to like okay, what do we need, what actually do we need to do here? Yeah, so good question.
Yeah, so I guess with BPA, did you have some idea early on whether, like, did you have the ability to have someone look through Wizard and know if there was like a major site somewhere, or?
Yeah, no one ever told us. We kind of, we assumed that this was going to need a survey. So I think we even had it surveyed before the initial consultation was complete. Like, we know this is going to need a survey because it's just such a high probability area. But yeah, no one said for sure there was a site out there. Yeah, good question.
Do you have time for one more, Ryan? Okay. Yeah. Allison, if you have a question again in the chat or in person, we can submit it. You can submit it through the feedback form, and we'll get back to you that way. And we have a panel discussion at the end. So thanks, guys.
Well, thank you, Aaron. Awesome. Great kickoff to case study 1. So let's get into the meat of this case study. I'm going to invite up Brian Copper is Brian here? He might be online. I think he is online. And also invite up, because we kind of grouped folks together, so I'm also going to invite up Shar and Rocky with Okanagan County Planning and Alex with Chelan County Planning as well. So I think Brian's going to kick off this CLOMR, LOMR initiation discussion. So it's Brian. I think Brian, is he out there? Guess I should have had some of those chat GBT jokes ready to fill some of the empty space right now. But anyway, we could have, if Brian's not quite ready, we could have, or is he ready? Oh, I don't know, Shar, Rocky, or Alex, if you want to, maybe one of you can start the discussion on the just CLOMR, LOMR initiation process. Free to, yeah.
I got to turn these mics on. Hang on.
Oh, okay. Oh, sorry.
So in Okanagan County, for the CLOMR process, we made it so all of the information is brought to us. We will sign off the MT2 form, and then the applicant will be responsible to draft the letter that goes out to the community, and our director will sign it, and then they'll send out their own letters. So we're pretty minimal on that.
Questions on that or comments? Thoughts? Online? Okay, cool.
And for Chelan County, we actually have a consultant that does all our floodplain development work for us. So,
Sorry.
For Chelan County, we actually have a consultant that does all our floodplain development permitting. So once a project is ready for the floodplain permitting and or the CLOMR process, we have the consultant submit either a no-rise or a floodplain elevation certificate, and it's reviewed by our contractor, and then if needed, a floodplain development permit is issued.
Any questions on that or the Chelan County process? Online, I don't know if there's anything. Cool. Is Brian? Oh no. Okay.
There's no questions on that.
Okay. Has Brian hopped on yet at all, or?
Not quite yet. If we could,
I have to.
maybe.
Yeah, I might have to go to the next one. Unless, is there any other? I guess for the county folks, any kind of questions or discussion on the CLOMR LOMR process?
rookie question here. So in an application, if it's for development of a floodplain or restoration for a floodplain, is there differences in the process of how that is evaluated and handled?
So not in Okanagan County. If you're, they're all pretty much handled the same.
Yeah, and for Chelan County, it all depends on the location of the project as well as what the project is. Based on that information, it may qualify for a shoreline exemption, or it could require a more extensive shoreline development permit. It's all based on the use chart in our SMP. So.
Hi, sorry, I must have missed this. Was there a shoreline permit as well?
For what? For which county or?
Either one of them, or for this project that?
Yeah, for this type of project, is kind of, yeah, would there be a shoreline permit?
So for the one that Ryan just went through, it would, it qualified for a shoreline exemption. I think that just a letter from the county was all that was issued, and then the floodplain development permit. So.
And that's the same for Okanagan County.
These type of projects would get a shoreline exemption.
More than likely,
okay.
Yes.
I'm looking at the slide behind you on the screen, and I'm looking at how many things feed into the county in this, and I'm curious, for the county permits, are there sequence requirements? They obtain other permits prior to the county making their decision, or I'm just kind of curious at how much feeds into that county box versus the arrows flowing other directions. And I know this isn't your diagram, but I'm curious about the sequence of permitting requirements. Do you have to show one permit before you can get the next, and that forward?
So if you don't have the permit, it can be a condition of approval. So we'll go out to the commenting agencies. They'll say, hey, they still need this permit. We'll add that as a condition of approval and move on from there.
And a lot of times for permitting, shoreline permitting, especially in Chelan County, we do require that an HPA be issued first. So obviously a lot of the stream or the fish restorations are exempt from SEPA, and so you would need to coordinate with DFW on obtaining your HPA, and then upon completion of that, submitting it to the county.
Yeah, it's been my experience that the county pretty much says we want to be last in line. Show us that you have all your other permits before we'll issue ours. A question for you, Alex. Does the county have any plans to hire the floodplain coordinator position internally, or is the plan for now to kind of keep it the way it is?
For now, we're just going to continue utilizing Petite as our floodplain development. I don't think there's any future plans on hiring a floodplain coordinator. So.
Allison asked, who is the, do you know the contact at Chelan County Community Development that floodplain development permit and CLOMR applications go to?
First, you would need to submit that to the county for review, and then we submit it out to our consultants. So, so essentially, the county would work as the person or the entity that would issue the permits, but it would be through, it would be reviewed by our floodplain administrator, our consultant, and then a lot of times a floodplain development permit is actually issued by our building official.
So I think I heard you say earlier, is it, it's generally true for fish habitat improvement projects that we meet a county exemption for the shoreline permit, but we generally still need the floodplain development permit?
Yes.
Yes, that's correct.
All right, any luck on Brian?
No, no, I think we can
Okay.
move on, I
Yeah.
think.
Is there any other last final call? We might have to loop back to Brian. Okay, let's just hop ahead. Yeah, thanks, Schlein County, Okanaka County folks. Let's hop ahead to archaeology and coastal resources in the EO 2102. So I'll invite up Kate Tipton with BPA, and Troy Wilson should be remote. Yeah, I don't know if I think Katie was first in line, so I guess we'll give you first dibs on taking a swing at it. So.
Thank you. I'm a little earlier than expected. So while they're finding my slides, I'm Katie Tipton. I mostly go by Tipton. I'm a senior archaeologist at Bonneville Power in our Fish and Wildlife program. So I thought I'd give a presentation to kind of provide the overview of Section 106. I noticed there's a lot of good cultural questions going on, but I thought I'd give that overview in the process and highlight some important things to include to your federal partners that would help make this process maybe a little smoother. With that agency soup that you saw on the last slide of all the different connecting dots. Real quick, this is a photo of She Who Watches, one of the many petroglyphs and pictographs that we have displayed at the Horse Thief Lake section of the Columbia Hills State Park. This is relocated from areas impacted and inundated by the Dalles and John Day dams. Oh, I have the clicker. I was gonna say next slide. So I'm going to jump right into it. Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act of 1966, or NHPA. I won't read the entirety of this paragraph, but highlighted the main parts that federal agencies operate under for Section 106. And basically, it requires federal agencies to consider the effects to historic properties of projects they carry out, assist, fund, permit, license, or approve throughout the country. So if there's a federal or federally assisted project that has potential to affect historic properties, a Section 106 review will take place. So really key things to think about when you're planning your projects about that federal nexus requiring that permit or approval, if it's occurring on federal land, or if you're using federal funds like BPA funds. So keep in mind though, the federal agency will establish whether an action is considered an undertaking needing Section 106 review. So when you have that federal nexus, remember to connect early and start that conversation as soon as possible. As we've all recognized, cultural resources review takes a while, so really need to get those dots connected as soon as possible. And if you have more than one agency involved, so say you have BPA funding and it's on Forest Service property, it's integral to make those connections with the agencies so they can coordinate a lead agency reviewer so you're not having that double dip in the Section 106 review process. And also a good way to think about what triggers Section 106 compliance are the activities involving ground disturbance. So if you have that federal nexus and you're gonna have ground disturbing activities, you're more likely gonna have Section 106 review. So definitely keep that in mind. Really quick, for your pub trivia, if you wanna know the difference between cultural resources and historic properties, you'll notice I've been saying both. They're a bit interchangeable, but really the working definition for historic properties are those physical remains, object places, historic records, and traditional cultural practices or beliefs that connect people to their past. And you'll hear cultural resources used as more of a broad overreach term by us, but when you hear historic property, that is more in the Section 106 vein review that is significant to Section 106. So when you're hearing your federal agencies say historic properties, that's under Section 106 review. And then when we're saying cultural resources, we're just being a bit more broad in our definitions. So, the process. I keep saying Section 106 is a process. It's not a permit, it's a process. And I'm gonna go over real quick what that process entails. It's 4 easy peasy, lemon squeezy steps, just right here. You initiate, identify historic properties, assess effects to historic properties, and resolve adverse effects. Done, I can leave now. But I will mostly be focusing on the first 3 steps for Section 106. Those are the main, really important, juicy bits for us. So initiating the process. That's really important to establish if it is an undertaking. Identifying those appropriate state historic preservation officers, tribal historic preservation officers, planning to involve the public, that's the consultation piece. Section 106 is a conversation, it's not a one-way street. We're having a lot of discussion back and forth. And then also identifying those other consulting parties, so affected tribes as well. So say you have an undertaking taking place, we're now gonna need to identify historic properties. That's determining the scope of efforts, identifying historic properties, and evaluating their significance. And I wanna say it's not the end-all be-all if you identify historic properties. We just gotta move to the next step and assess the adverse effects. So you're applying some criteria of if there's gonna be an adverse effect to that actual resource. If you can avoid, great, we move on. We off-ramp and continue on in our review. But unfortunately, if you cannot, you move to the 4th step and mitigate for those effects to a historic property, not cultural resource. So easy peasy, 4 steps. And then all the conversations that occur in between that. So real quick, I'm gonna go over the players in Section 106, or the consulting parties. So you have that federal agency, the one who is identifying if it's an undertaking and you're making those dots and connections. And then you have the consulting parties. They're the important folks that we are having those conversations with. So like I said, SHPO, here in Washington, it's the Department of Archaeology and Historic Preservation, so DAP. Then the Tribal Historic Preservation Officers, who can also act as the SHPO if on tribal lands, the affected tribes. And I really want to point out that the agency will identify these consulting parties. You can help, but it's really up to the agency to identify those consulting parties. And when it comes to tribes, agencies have a tribal trust responsibility, and it's integral for those federal agencies to consult with those identified affected tribes. So that's a really key integral piece in the process. And then we also have landowners, so it's really important to know if we're working on other federal agencies' properties, or even state agency, municipalities, and think about any others. We do have the ACHP here. They only get involved if it really gets juicy, so we'll just leave them out of it for now. So this is the main thing that's really important in the Section 106 process, is the area of potential effect. This is the geographic area within an undertaking may directly or indirectly cause changes in the character or use of historic properties if such properties exist. So this extends across the surface, but is also vertical, hence why we're really cautious about thinking about all the digging that's going on. So also think about those direct and indirect effects. So while you may be doing large wood debris installations, you may have some flooding across the floodplain. We really care about those places that get inundated because those can also have some impacts to historic properties. Also thinking about your construction, post-construction, and operation and maintenance of your project. But really, it's all areas of potential ground disturbance. So think about your access routes for vehicles, construction, equipment, staging areas for materials, supplies, construction area, everything in the kitchen sink, really. We want to know that when we're doing that area of potential effect. So this is a quick example map of good old Whiskey Creek for a fish barrier removal. You'll see that there are the fish barriers, but you also have the potential travel paths, the equipment, the staging areas, all the excavation areas. This is really what we want when we're looking to start that Section 106 process and getting that information to the consulting parties. I'm gonna let you sit with that for a second. Got one more. So this is text heavy. I apologize. Like I said, we want everything in the kitchen sink when we're doing the Section 106 process. We want to know the spatial data, the area that you're working in, but we also want detailed project descriptions. We want to know the work performed. We want to know the equipment that's being used. Are you hand augering? Are you using excavation units? Proposed depth of ground disturbance. Those are all really important. Nothing is too small for us to know in doing Section 106. And finally, land ownership information. This is especially helpful to your non-land managing agencies like BPA. We need to have that coordination with those different landowners. And then if you have any buildings on the area, please let us know if that structure was built in 1997 by Bob. That's great. We won't look at it as a historic property just yet. And then finally, how long does it take? Really? It depends. Depends on what you have. Perfect world, we've seen 120 days, but when it gets complex, it can take upwards of 6 months to a year to get through that cultural resources. So really keep these things in mind when you are going through that Section 106 timeline. That's it. Yeah, I can.
All right, so that was awesome. And now we have Troy Wilson. I think he's online with RCO.
Okay, Brian is also ready to go. If if we want to have him now, or
maybe let's just wrap up. We'll kind of keep the continuity of cultural. And we'll
sounds
have
good.
Troy share a bit about. Oh, there he is. Hey, Troy. If you can see us, we can see yours. I think that's your screen. Oh, go ahead. Yeah, Troy, whenever you're ready to go. The floor is yours. Oh, maybe you can't hear us. Troy, can you hear us?
He's muted.
Oh, Troy, you're muted too. Shoot, I don't think he can hear us. You need like a sign to hold up. Troy, we can't hear you. Gotta love hybrid meetings. This is awkward.
Troy, go ahead and unmute your microphone if you can hear. Troy, go ahead and start talking.
Okay. All right, like start talking. Okay. Yeah, and you messaged them, obviously.
His microphone's still muted that I'm seeing.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, we can all see it's muted there. Maybe, I guess we could pivot to Brian. Maybe, I guess. Yeah, maybe we'll have to pivot because I'm not sure if he can't hear us. We'll have to talk to him or something. That's true. Yeah.
Brian, now Troy, go ahead and start talking about it.
Troy, can you?
Troy, go ahead and start talking. You're on.
I do have his. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. I guess while we're doing that, any question? Yeah, let's do any questions for Katie. We kind of rushed her off while we're figuring out on cultural resources. McLean, actually, and let me do two things before you chat. Alphabet soup, I had a request, try to spell out what, HPA and that sort of thing means. A few folks don't know, so please spell it out. And also a request because we are recording it, to wait till the mic runner gets there, which folks have been doing better, but just a reminder, just so we can hear your questions. So I wanted to mention those two things. So anyway, have at it, McLean.
Hey, Tipton, over here. Hi. What are I call it threading the needles of trying to get a project rolling is the development of the APE. Often we learn a lot more about a site as we're progressing designs, and so we tend to make a bigger APE in the event that we may need the space, and sometimes that becomes kind of ridiculous when you get to the point of project construction and your APE is actually huge, but maybe your construction area is small. Or I was wondering if you had any thoughts on the development of that APE and how to, just your lens on like how to go about developing it to be sure we get everything, because I know expanding the APE later is much more difficult than starting with a larger one.
Yeah, that should work. Oh.
It doesn't like me. Oh, yeah, there you go. Now it likes me. Yeah, so usually our rule of thumb is to go bigger is better, and then you can always take away at the end of the day. So as you said, it's harder to add to it because that opens up the consultation process again, which is a 30-day review that we do not control. It's 30 days until we get all responses or until the clock has run out. So we like the bigger APE, and then as design happens and you're having those discussions with your federal partner, they can start tailoring kind of the surveys and that APE. So then when we reach the threshold of submitting all that information, we can tell them that the AP has changed. So there is a bit of that we can do at BPA, and I know every agency has a bit of their own approach, so I don't want to speak for everyone, but at BPA we can do that in our review process of starting bigger, and then once we go through design, maybe do some surveys, realizing, oh gosh, we don't need all of this, we can tailor that, and then when we submit our documentation, we note that we streamlined it or narrowed our scope a bit from what we initially thought. I hope that's helpful for you. Yeah.
We try Troy one more time, or is he? Did give Troy one last chance? I don't know, technical issues. You might just have to forego.
It's like I was not prepared for 2105.
Yeah. Okay.
Hi, Troy. If you just want to start talking, we can just see if your mic is working.
Okay, why don't we, this is great, yeah. Katie, think, oh.
I was going to expand on that just a little bit. I'm Amanda Safrantis, I'm the archaeologist for the North Zone for the Okawen. We understand that yes, bigger is better, and we understand that like your project footprint might not always be what is actually being worked on, if that makes sense. Like you're gonna have your huge project footprint, then you have like your staging area. We're only gonna survey that section. We're only gonna survey where you're actually gonna do disturbing work and whatnot. So your footprint can be huge, but that doesn't necessarily mean like your APE is the whole thing, which is important to like delineate, because then when you do have to get a cultural survey contract going, it's a lot less space, and thus your funding is a lot, requirement for cultural will be a lot less as well.
Thanks, Amanda. Let's go ahead and transition to Brian. Thank you, Kate, so much.
I think we have.
Can we save it for the panel discussion? Yeah, just trying to get us to get the FEMA portion before break. Got to get those muffins. Brian, can you hear us?
Hi.
All right, we can hear you. Yeah, we can hear you. You got about 13 minutes before break, so have at it.
Okay. I don't want to get in the way. Oh, I can't share So sharing is not turned on. So maybe Gabby, could you share the slides? I'd emailed it. It's about a 4 megabyte file.
She's going to turn on the share your slide in a second, so she'll go to you.
Okay, I don't want to get in between break. Well, I guess I am, but I don't want to make you guys late.
You can go and introduce yourself, Brian, if you want to.
Yeah, Brian Coper. I work at FEMA headquarters, MT2 lead. MT2 is an acronym for CLOMRs, LOMRs, which is
Brian,
another acronym.
I don't mean to interrupt you. If you
Yeah,
could
go ahead.
possibly just email me that presentation real fast,
Okay.
just because I'm having a little problem letting you share. Thank you.
That's right. I did. So let me know if you didn't get it or if you don't get it. Sometimes it's slow on our end. But yep, conditional letters of map revision, those are smaller scale map updates and revisions to the maps that are processed through headquarters. Regions conduct larger flood studies at usually the watershed level, county level, historically. So the smaller scale stuff is processed through headquarters, which is why I'm here in the DC office. But we often coordinate with our regions, especially if there's an ongoing study or new data being available. We will make sure that we're aligned with schedules and making sure that the maps are up to date on the best available data at the time. So there's some regulations, of course, to follow. We have guidance, policy standards as well. So we have links for those, which are in the presentation we can share as well.
Brian, can
afterwards.
you try sharing
Yes.
your screen now, please?
Let me see. Right. Thank you. Let's see. Okay. Move this down. So this is a larger presentation than the time we have, but it could be shared over email.
Are you sharing your screen right now with us, Brian?
Yes.
Oh.
Let me hit the share button. There. You see it?
Looks great. Thanks, Brian.
Okay, you're welcome. All right. Just basics. It's about here. There's MT1s as well, which are amendments to the map, which we have another colleague in our office that processes those. Structure specific determinations, property specific determinations. They don't actually revise the map. There's not an appeal period associated with them. So it's a little bit less of a data lift that needs to be submitted. No technical modeling to use the map to update the H&H. So CLOMR's proposed projects don't revise the firm. It's not a permit. They're just FEMA's comments on what the proposed project would have on the regulatory flood hazard information if built as proposed. It's a letter, comes out as a letter. This is an example. It's bigger when you get it in person. It's also emailed out. They're not posted on the FEMA Map Service Center like LOMRs are because they're not determinations. There are just comment letters. Sometimes we get multiple CLOMRs for project site or project area if the project changes significantly or if a lot of time has passed between when the data was sent in and then when if other conditions have changed or new data becomes available or the project may have changed. So that's why they're not posted on the FEMA Map Service Center, but they are sent to the community, the floodplain administrator, to have on record. All requests for map change come through the community. Community is our partner, so that's the reason why they adopt the maps, enforce the floodplain management requirements, because that's what one of the main purposes of the maps, of course, and the community being our partner. When is a CLOMR required? That's the regulation, as mentioned earlier, there are regulations. This is one of many that we'll talk about today, but that is a primary one to know. It refers to other regulations, which are the floodplain management regulations 60.3. Essentially, it's whether there's a floodway or not a floodway. If there's a floodway and there's encroachment into the floodway, you can't increase more than 0.00 foot. The BFE can't if you're in the floodway. If you're outside the floodway, you can't increase more than 1 foot. So if you're just in the SFHA, so that's making sure the community, when they permit, they don't cause cumulative increases in other areas, upstream, downstream. So we just have to look larger than maybe just the project site. It's often the case. Go through these quickly. LOMR, letter of map revision. So when a project is built, or sometimes LOMRs are submitted without even a proposed project being sent in. It could be just maybe new H&H, and we need to change the map based on that. It's also in a letter. These are posted on a FEMA Map Service Center website for download, available to the public. There's usually an appeal period because it does change the regulatory map, 90-day appeal period. It's publications in the newspaper. Is an example of a LOMR. Could have these attachments, not always a profile, not revised, not always a floodway data table revised, but this is one that shows a bit of everything. It could be part of the LOMR. You always have a cover letter and then attachments. So reasons for a LOMR, more detailed data, physical changes, floodways can change, BFEs, base flood elevations can change, the 100-year base flood elevation. This is some of the regulations that we have, 60, 65 and 72 websites there. So these slides will all be shared afterwards. So I'm going to go quickly. Floodplain management, like I mentioned earlier, is 60.3. So the community adopts these based on their ordinance. So they'll have different levels of ordinance, and based on those ordinances, what's shown on the map, they'll be used for permitting. 60.3 is divided into basically these headings here. I won't go through all these today, but just to know that they're there. So depending on what's on the effective map, you look at those, and then that would be the one that applies. Some more floodplain management criteria. Part 60 refers to a technical bulletin. 10, which is a floodplain management bulletin. There's a link there for reference. It's reasonably safe from flooding. It's a term of art that we use, and it means it's defined in this bulletin. So it depends on what the project is and where the flooding conditions are. But it's when we say it's reasonably safe from flooding, and we have to do some type of analysis to show that. There's local state requirements. There can also be higher standards. So 60.3 mentioned earlier are the floodplain management requirements. Those are the minimum requirements. States have the ability to have higher standards. We, of course, encourage higher standards. Those are just the minimum. So these are some examples of states that have higher standards. Part 65 is the revisions section, so LOMRs. Those will be predominantly in 65 and in CLOMRs. 65.3, 65.4. Which is here. Don't have time to read through all these. So whether it's BFEs or floodway revision, if there's a levee, refer to 65.10. Coastal 65.11. Different criteria apply based on the request for the change. So there will be all sorts of reasons why a map would want to be changed. I mentioned this one earlier, 65.12. This is for proposed projects for CLOMRs. More about that here. There's a BFE example. Go through that later date. There's a fee schedule if the project is just not fee exempt, which is in part 72 of the regs. This fee schedule is online, so based on the request type, you'll see the different fees are broken out. That's part of the package when it's sent into us, and the case number is initiated for processing. There are fee exemptions. There's a regulation for that. It's also on our website, but there's various reasons why a case may be fee exempt. Guidance documents, procedure manuals, mentioned earlier, those are the links. So there's stuff to help you. It's just not as easy peasy as a previous presentation, maybe more than 4 steps. probably several more steps. But we try to make it as streamlined as possible. There's various forms based on the request type. So there's always Form 1, the overview concurrence form. And based on there's hydrology, riverine structures, coastal, bluefield fan even. Pick which form applies, fill it out, follow the instructions, send it in. Okay. Basic workflow. Don't have time before the break to go through all of this. So just look at the red box. That's where it ends. So start, where does it start?
Hi, Brian.
Yes.
I just want to let you
Yes.
know we have about 2 more minutes.
2 more minutes. Okay. Only about 10 slides. Okay. Timelines, a 9-day timeline for our review comments. We also offer 90 days for the requester community to send data back to us. So that is about it. I talked about appeals. There's violations, of course, potential violations for the floodplain management requirements. We don't see too many of those, thankfully, but they do happen. And I'll just zip to our contact information. This is my name, Brian Coper. ESA is another acronym for Endangered Species Act. So CLOMRs have to have ESA compliance as part of the processing. We have a guidance document for that, or we talk about it also in our guidance document for MT2s. Andrew Jackson also helps ESA support for that, and Tigger Panopti is my colleague here who in headquarters who also helps on MT2s. So that is it in a very high-flying lightning round of presentation slides.
We have time for maybe one quick question. We do have the panel discussion before, I think it's before lunch too, but maybe, yeah, I guess Jess, you got one, and wait till the mic just so we can hear you.
Jess Jordan, Army Corps of Engineers. Just a clarifying question, because I
Yeah.
think maybe there's some misunderstanding. You do not need a Corps permit in order to issue a LOMR or CLOMR. You need ESA compliance to issue a LOMR or CLOMR.
Correct. But oftentimes ESA compliance is through a 404 permit, and it can be demonstrated that way. It's not necessarily required though.
Great. Well, we got our break. I think we had Troy on, but we'll maybe loop him in afterwards. We can kind of talk with him. But yeah, 10-minute break. Enjoy some refreshments, and we'll be back at 10 o'clock Pacific time.
Thank you all.